of Act 2. Eric is standing just inside the room and the others are staring at him.
You know, don't you?
Yes, we know.
Eric, I can't believe it. There must be some mistake. You don't know what we've been saying.
It's a good job for him he doesn't, isn't it?
Why?
Because Mother's been busy blaming everything on the young man who got this girl into trouble and saying he shouldn't escape and should be made an example of.
That's enough, Sheila.
You haven't made it any easier for me, have you, Mother?
But I didn't know it was you. I never dreamt. Besides, you're not the type. You don't get drunk.
Of course he does. I told you he did.
You told her? Why, you little sneak.
No, that's not fair, Eric. I could have told her months ago, but of course I didn't. I only told her tonight because I knew everything was coming out. It was simply bound to come out tonight, so I thought she might as well know in advance. Don't forget, I've already been through it.
Sheila, I simply don't understand your attitude.
Neither do I. If you'd any sense of loyalty.
Just a minute, Mr. Burling. There'll be plenty of time when I've gone for you all to adjust your family relationships. But now I must hear what your son has to tell me. And I'll be obliged if you'll let us get on without any further interruptions. Now then.
Could I have a drink first?
No!
Yes. I know he's your son and this is your house, but look at him. He needs a drink now just to see him through.
All right, go on.
Eric goes for a whiskey. His whole manner of handling the decanter and then the drink shows his familiarity with quick, heavy drinking. The others watch him narrowly.
I understand a lot of things now that I didn't understand before.
Don't start on that. I want to get on. When did you first meet this girl?
One night last November.
Where did you meet her?
In the Palace Bar. I'd been there an hour or so with 2 or 3 chaps. I was a bit squiffy.
What happened then?
I began talking to her and stood her a few drinks. I was rather far gone by the time we had to go.
Was she drunk too?
She told me afterwards that she was a bit, chiefly because she'd not had much to eat that day.
Why had she gone there?
She wasn't the usual sort, but, well, I suppose she didn't know what to do. There was some woman who wanted to help her go there. I never quite understood about that.
You went with her to her lodgings that night?
Yes, I insisted, it seems. I'm not very clear about it, but afterwards she told me she didn't want me to go in, but that, well, I was in that state when a chap could easily turn nasty, and I threatened to make a row.
So she let you in?
Yes, and that's when it happened. And I didn't even remember. That's the hellish thing. Oh my God, how stupid it all is.
Oh, Eric, how could you?
Sheila, take your mother along to the drawing room.
But I want to...
You heard what I said. Go on, Sybil.
He goes to open the door while Sheila takes her mother out. Then he closes it and comes in.
When did you meet her again?
About a fortnight afterwards.
By appointment?
No, and I couldn't remember her name or where she lived. It was all very vague, but I happened to see her again in the Palace Bar.
More drinks?
Yes, though that time I wasn't so bad.
But you took her home again?
Yes, and this time we talked a bit. She told me something about herself, and I talked too. Told her my name and what I did.
And you made love again?
Yes, I wasn't in love with her or anything, but I liked her. She was pretty and a good sport.
So you had to go to bed with her?
Well, I'm old enough to be married, aren't I? And I'm not married. And I hate these fat old tarts around town. The ones I see some of your respectable friends with.
I don't want any of that talk from you.
I don't want any of it from you either. Settle it afterwards. Did you arrange to see each other after that?
Yes, and the next time, or the time after that, she told me she thought she was going to have a baby. She wasn't quite sure, and then she was.
And of course, she was very worried about it.
Yes, and so was I. I was in a hell of a state about it.
Did she suggest that you ought to marry her?
No, she didn't want me to marry her. Said I didn't love her, and all that. In a way, she treated me as if I were a kid, though I was nearly as old as she was.
So what did you propose to do?
Well, she hadn't a job, and didn't feel like trying again for one, and she'd no money left, so I insisted on giving her enough money to keep her going, until she refused to take any more.
How much did you give her altogether?
I suppose about £50 all told.
£50? On top of drinking and going around town? Where did you get £50 from?
That's my question too.
I got it from the office.
My office?
Yes.
You mean you stole the money?
Not really.
What do you mean, not really?
This isn't my fault.
I'm sorry, Arthur, but I simply couldn't stay in there. I had to know what's happening.
Well, I can tell you what's happening. He's admitted he was responsible for the girl's condition, and now he's telling us he supplied her with money that he stole from the office.
Eric, you stole money?
No, not really. I intended to pay it back.
We've heard that story before. How could you have paid it back?
I'd have managed somehow. I had to have some money.
I don't understand how you could take as much of that out of the office without somebody knowing.
There were some small accounts to collect, and I asked for cash.
Gave the firm's receipt and then kept the money, eh?
Yes.
You must give me a lift of those accounts. I've got to cover this up as soon as I can. You damn fool! Why didn't you come to me when you found yourself in this mess?
Because you're not the kind of father a chap can go to when he's in trouble. That's why.
Don't talk to me like that. Your trouble is you've been spoilt.
And my trouble is that I haven't much time. You'll be able to divide the responsibility between you when I've gone. Just one last question, that's all. The girl discovered that this money you were giving her was stolen, didn't she?
Yes. That was the worst of all. She wouldn't take any more, and she didn't want to see me again. Here, but how did you know that? Did she tell you?
No, she told me nothing. I never spoke to her.
She told Mother.
Sheila!
Well, he has to know.
She told you? Did she come here? But then she couldn't have done. She didn't even know I lived here. What happened?
Mrs. Burling, distressed, shakes her head but does not reply.
Come on, don't just look like that. Tell me what happened?
I'll tell you. She went to your mother's committee for help after she'd done with you. Your mother refused that help.
Then you killed her. She came to you to protect me, and you turned her away. Yes, and you killed her, and the child she'd have had too. My child, your own grandchild, you killed them both. Damn you, damn you.
No, Eric, please. I didn't know. I didn't understand.
You don't understand anything. You never did. You never even tried, you.
Eric, don't.
What, you hysterical young fool? Get back or I'll...
Stop! And be quiet for a moment and listen to me. I don't need to know any more. Neither do you. This girl killed herself and died a horrible death. But each of you helped to kill her. Remember that and never forget it. But then I don't think you ever will. Remember what you did, Mrs. Burling. You turned her away when she most needed help. You refused her even the pitiable little bit of organised charity you had in your power to grant her. Remember what you did.
My God, I'm not likely to forget.
Just used her for the end of a stupid drunken evening as if she was an animal, a thing, not a person. No, you won't forget.
I know. I had her turned out of a job. I started it.
You helped, but you didn't start it. You started it. She wanted 25 shillings a week instead of 22 and sixpence. You made her pay a heavy price for that, and now she'll make you pay a heavier price still.
Inspector, I'd give thousands. Yes, thousands to...
You're offering the money at the wrong time, Mr. Burling. No, I don't think any of you will forget, nor that young man Croft, though he at least had some affection for her and made her happy for a time. Well, Eva Smith's gone. You can't do her any more harm, and you can't do her any good now either. You can't even say, I'm sorry, Eva Smith.
That's the worst of it.
But just remember this. One Eva Smith has gone, but there are millions and millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness, all intertwined with our lives and what we think and say and do. We don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. And I tell you that the time will soon come when, if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. Good night.
He walks straight out, leaving them staring, subdued and wondering. Sheila is still quietly crying. Mrs. Burling has collapsed into a chair. Eric is brooding desperately. Burling, the only active one, hears the front door slam, moves hesitatingly towards the door, stops, looks gloomily at the other three, then pours himself out a drink, which he hastily swallows.
You're the one I blame for this.
I'll bet I am.
Yes, and you don't even yet realise all you've done. Most of this is bound to come out. There'll be a public scandal.
Well, I don't care now.
You don't seem to care about anything, but I care. I was almost certain for a knighthood in the next honours list.
For God's sake, what does it matter now whether they give you a knighthood or not?
It doesn't matter to you. Apparently nothing matters to you, but it may interest you to know that until every penny of that money you stole is repaid, you'll work for nothing. And there's going to be no more of this drinking around town and picking up women at the palace bar.
I should think not, Eric. I'm absolutely ashamed of you.
Well, I don't blame you, but don't forget I'm ashamed of you as well. Yes, both of you.
Drop that. There's every excuse for what your mother and I did. It turned out, unfortunately, that's all.
That's all.
Well, what have you got to say?
I don't know where to begin.
Then don't begin. Nobody wants you to.
I behaved badly too. I know I did. I'm ashamed of it. But now you're beginning all over again to pretend that nothing much has happened.
Nothing much has happened. Haven't I already said there'll be a public scandal, unless we're lucky? And who here will suffer from that more than I will?
But that's not what I'm talking about. I don't care about that. The point is, you don't seem to have learned anything.
Oh, don't I? Well, you're quite wrong there. I've learned plenty tonight. And you don't want me to tell you what I've learned, I hope. When I look back on tonight, when I think of what I was feeling when the five of us sat down to dinner at that table.
Yes, and do you remember when you said to Gerald and me after dinner, when you were feeling so pleased with yourself, you told us that a man has to make his own way, look after himself, and mind his own business, and that we weren't to take any notice of these cranks who tell us that everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together. Do you remember? Yes. And then one of those cranks walked in, the inspector. I didn't notice you told him that it's every man for himself.
Is that when the inspector came? Just after Father had said that?
Yes. What of it?
Now what's the matter, Sheila?
It's queer. Very queer.
I know what you're going to say, because I've been wondering myself.
It doesn't much matter now, of course, but was he really a police inspector?
Well, if he wasn't, it matters a bad devil of a lot.
No, it doesn't.
Don't talk rubbish. Of course it does.
Well, it doesn't to me, and it oughtn't to you either.
Oh, don't be childish, Sheila.
I'm not being. If you want to know, it's you two who are being childish, trying not to face the facts.
I won't have that sort of talk. Any more of that and you leave this room.
Oh, that'll be terrible for her, won't it?
I'm going anyhow in a minute or two. But don't you see, if all that's come out tonight is true, then it doesn't much matter who it was or who made us confess. And it was true, wasn't it? You turned the girl out of one job and I had her turned out of another. Gerald kept her at a time when he was supposed to be too busy to see me. Eric, well, we know what Eric did. And Mother hardened her heart and gave her the final push that finished her. That's what's important, and not whether a man is a police inspector or not.
He was our police inspector, all right.
That's what I mean, Eric. But if it's any comfort to you, and it wasn't to me, I have an idea, and I had it all along vaguely, that there was something curious about him. He never seemed like an ordinary police inspector.
You're right. I felt it too, didn't you?
Well, I must say his manner was quite extraordinary, so rude and assertive.
And then look at the way he talked to me, telling me to shut up and so on. He must have known I was an ex-Lord Mayor and a magistrate and so forth. Besides, the way he talked, you remember, I mean, they don't talk like that. I've had dealings with dozens of them.
All right, but it doesn't make any real difference, you know.
Of course it does.
No, Sheila's right. It doesn't.
Well, that's comic, that is, coming from you. You're the one it makes most difference to. You've confessed to theft, and now he knows all about it, and he can bring it out at the inquest. And then, if necessary, carry it to court. He can't do anything to your mother and Sheila and me, except perhaps to make us look a bit ashamed of ourselves in public. But as for you, he can ruin you, you know.
We hardly ever told him anything he didn't know.
That's
Did you
nothing.
notice that?
He had a bit of information left by the girl, made a few smart guesses, but the fact remains that if we hadn't talked so much, he'd have had little to go on. And really, when I come to think of it, why you all had to go letting everything come out like that beats me.
It's all right talking like that now, but he made us confess.
He certainly didn't make me confess, as you call it. I told him quite plain that I thought I had done no more than my duty.
Oh, Mother!
The fact is, you allowed yourselves to be bluffed. Yes, bluffed.
Now, really, Arthur.
No, not you, my dear, but these two. That fellow obviously didn't like us. He was prejudiced from the start, probably a socialist or some sort of crank. He talked like one. And then, instead of standing up to him, you let him bluff you into talking about your private affairs. You ought to have stood up to him.
Well, I didn't notice you standing up to him.
No, because by the time you'd admitted you'd been taking money, what chance had I after that? I was a fool not to have insisted upon seeing him alone.
That wouldn't have worked.
Of course it wouldn't.
Really, from the way you children talk, you might be wanting to help him instead of us. Now just be quiet so that your father can decide what we ought to do.
Yes, well, we'll have to do something, and we'll have to get to work quickly too.
As he hesitates, there's a ring at the front door. They look at each other in alarm.
Now, who's this? Had I better go?
No, Edna will go. I asked her to wait up and make us some tea.
It might be Gerald coming back.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'd forgotten about him.
It's Mr. Croft.
I hope you don't mind my coming back.
No, of course not, Gerald.
I had a special reason for coming. When did that inspector go?
Only a few minutes ago. He put us all through it.
Sheila?
Gerald might as well know.
Now, we needn't bother with all that stuff.
All right. But we're all in it, up to the neck. It got worse after you left.
How did he behave?
He was frightening.
If you ask me, he behaved in a very peculiar and suspicious manner.
The rude way he spoke to Mr. Burling and me, it was quite extraordinary.
They all look inquiringly at Gerald.
You know something. What is it?
That man wasn't a police officer.
What?
Are you certain?
I'm almost certain. That's what I came back to tell you.
Good lad. You asked about him, eh?
Yes, I met a police sergeant I know down the road. I asked him about this Inspector Gould and described the chap carefully to him. He swore that there wasn't any Inspector Gould or anybody like him on the force here.
You didn't tell him...
No, passed it off by saying I'd been having an argument with somebody. But the point is, this sergeant was dead certain they hadn't any inspector at all, like the chap who came here.
By jingo! A fake!
Didn't I tell you? Didn't I say I couldn't imagine a real police inspector talking like that to us?
Well, you were right. There isn't any such inspector. We've been had.
I'm going to make certain of this.
What are you going to do?
Ring up the Chief's Constable, Colonel Roberts.
Careful what you say, dear.
Of course. Brumley 8572. I was going to do this anyhow, but I had my suspicions all along. Colonel Roberts, please. Arthur Burling here. Oh, Roberts, Burling. Sorry to ring you up so late, but can you tell me if an Inspector Gould joined your staff lately? Gould. Goole. New man. Tall, clean-shaven. I see. Yes. Well, that settles it. Oh no, just a little argument we were all having here. Good night. There is no Inspector Gould on the police. That man definitely wasn't a police inspector at all. As Gerald says, we've been had.
I felt it all the time. He never talked like one. He never even looked like one.
This makes all the difference, you know. In fact, it makes all the difference.
Of course.
Suppose we're all nice people now.
If you've got nothing more sensible than that to say, Sheila, you better keep quiet.
She's right, though.
And you had better keep quiet anyhow. If that had been a police inspector and he'd heard you confess.
Arthur, careful.
Yes.
You see, Gerald, you haven't to know the rest of our crimes and idiocies.
That's all right. I don't want to. What do you make of this business now? Was it all a hoax?
Of course. Somebody put that fellow up to coming here and hoaxing us. There are people in this town who dislike me enough to do that. We ought to have seen through it from the first. In the ordinary way, I believe I would have done, but coming like that, bang on top of our little celebration, just when we were all feeling so pleased with ourselves, naturally, it took me by surprise.
I wish I'd been here when that man first arrived. I'd have asked him a few questions before I allowed him to ask us any.
It's all right saying that now.
I wasn't the only one of you who didn't give in to him. I was, in fact, the only one of you who didn't give in to him. And now I say we must discuss this business quietly and sensibly and decide if there's anything to be done about it.
You are absolutely right, my dear. Already we've discovered one important fact, that fellow was a fraud and we've been hoaxed. And that may not be the end of it by any means.
I'm sure it isn't.
Well, you are, eh? Good. Eric, sit down.
I'm all right.
All right, you're anything but all right, and you needn't stand there as if
As if what?
well, as if you'd nothing to do with us. Just remember your own position, young man. If anybody's up to his neck in this business, you are, so you better take some interest in it.
I do take some interest in it. I take too much. That's my trouble.
It's mine too.
Now, listen, you two. If you're still feeling on edge, then the least you can do is keep quiet. Leave this to us. I'll admit that fellow's antics rattled us a bit, but we found him out, and all we have to do is keep our heads. Now it's our turn.
Our turn to do what?
To behave sensibly, Sheila, which is more than you're doing.
What's the use of talking about behaving sensibly? You're beginning to pretend now that nothing's really happened at all, and I can't see it like that. This girl's still dead, isn't she? Nobody's brought her to life, have they?
That's just what I feel, Eric, and it's what they don't seem to understand.
Whoever that chap was, the fact remains that I did what I did, and Mother did what she did, and the rest of you did what you did to her. It's still the same rotten story, whether it's been told to a police inspector or to somebody else. According to you, I ought to feel a lot better. I stole some money, Gerald. You might as well know. I don't care. Let him know. The money's not the important thing. It's what happened to the girl and what we all did to her that matters. And I still feel the same way about it. And that's why I don't feel like sitting down and having a nice, cozy talk.
And Eric's absolutely right. And it's the best thing any one of us has said tonight, and it makes me feel a bit less ashamed of us. You're just beginning to pretend all over again.
But for God's sake!
Arthur!
Well, my dear, they're so damned exasperating. Why don't they just try to understand our position, or to see the difference between a lot of stuff like this coming out in private and a downright public scandal?
And I say the girl's dead and we all helped to kill her, and that's what matters.
And I say, either stop shouting or get out. Some fathers I know would have kicked you out of the house anyhow by this time, so hold your tongue if you want to stay here.
I don't give a damn now whether I stay here or not.
You'll stay here long enough to give me an account of that money you stole, yes, and pay it back too.
But that won't bring Eva Smith back to life, will it?
And it doesn't alter the fact that we all helped to kill her.
But is it a fact?
Of course it is. You don't know the whole story yet.
I suppose you're going to prove now you didn't spend last summer keeping this girl instead of seeing me, eh?
I did keep a girl last summer. I've admitted it, and I'm sorry, Sheila.
Well, I must admit you came out of it better than the rest of us. The inspector said that.
He wasn't an inspector.
Well, he inspected us all right. And don't let's start dodging and pretending now. Between us, we drove that girl to commit suicide.
Did we? Who says so? Because I say there's no more real evidence we did than there was that chap was a police inspector.
Of course there is.
No, there isn't. Look at it. A man comes here pretending to be a police officer. It's a hoax of some kind. Now, what does he do? Very artfully, working on bits of information he's picked up here and there, he bluffs us into confessing that we've all been mixed up in this girl's life in one way or another.
And so we have.
But how do you know it's the same girl?
Now, wait a minute. Let's see how that would work. Now, no, it wouldn't.
We all admitted it.
All right, you all admitted something to do with the girl, but how do you know it's the same girl?
He looks round triumphantly at them. As they puzzle this out, he turns to Burling after pause.
Look here, Mr. Burling. You sack a girl called Eva Smith. You've forgotten, but he shows you a photograph of her and then you remember, right?
Yeah, that part's straightforward enough, but what then?
Well, then he happens to know that Sheila once had a girl sacked from Millward's shop. He tells us that it's the same Eva Smith and shows her a photograph that she recognises.
Yes, the same photograph.
How do you know it's the same photograph? Did you see the one your father looked at?
No, I didn't.
And did your father see the one he showed you?
No, he didn't. I see what you mean now.
We've no proof it was the same photograph, and therefore no proof it was the same girl. Now take me. There never was a photograph, remember? He caught me out by suddenly announcing that this girl changed her name to Daisy Renton. I gave myself away at once because I'd known a Daisy Renton.
And there wasn't the slightest proof that this Daisy Renton was really Eva Smith. We got only his word for it. And we'd his word for it that he was a police inspector, and we know now he was lying. So he could have been lying all the time.
Of course he could. Probably was. Now what happened after I left?
I was upset because Eric had left the house, and this man said that if Eric didn't come back, he'd have to go and find him. Well, that made me feel worse still. And his manner was so severe, and he seemed so confident. Then quite suddenly he said I'd seen Eva Smith only 2 weeks ago.
Those were his exact words.
And like a fool, I said, yes, I had.
I don't see now why you did that. She didn't call herself Eva Smith when she came to see you at the committee, did she?
No, of course she didn't. But feeling so worried when he suddenly turned on me with those questions, I answered more or less as he wanted me to answer.
But Mother, don't forget that he showed you a photograph of the girl before that, and you obviously recognised it.
Did anybody else see it?
No, he showed it only to me.
Then don't you see, there's still no proof that it really was the same girl. He might have showed you the photograph of any girl who applied to the committee. And how do we know she was really Eva Smith or Daisy Renton?
Gerald's dead right. He could have used a different photograph each time, and we'd be none the wiser. We may all have been recognising different girls.
Exactly. Did he ask you to identify a photograph, Eric?
No, he didn't need a photograph by the time he'd got round to me. But obviously it must have been the same girl I knew who went to see Mother.
Why must it?
She said she had to help because she wouldn't take any more stolen money. And the girl I knew had told me that already.
Even then, that may have been all nonsense.
I don't see much nonsense about it when a girl goes and kills herself. You lot may be letting yourself out nicely, but I can't, nor can Mother. We did her in all right.
Oh, wait a minute. Don't be in such a hurry to put yourself into court. The interview with your mother could have been just as much of a put-up job, like all this police inspector business. The whole damn thing could have been a piece of bluff.
How can it? The girl's dead, isn't she?
What girl? There were probably 4 or 5 different girls.
That doesn't matter to me. The one I knew is dead.
Is she? How do we know she is?
That's right. You've got it. How do we know any girl killed herself today?
Now answer that one. Let's look at it from this fellow's point of view. We're having a little celebration here and feeling rather pleased with ourselves. Now he has to work a trick on us. The first thing he has to do is give us such a shock that after that he can bluff us all the time. So he starts right off. A girl has just died in the infirmary. She drank some strong disinfectant, died in agony.
All right, don't pile it on.
Well, there you are, you see. Just repeating it shakes you a bit. And that's what he had to do. Shake us at once and then start questioning us until we didn't know who we were, where we were. Oh, let's admit that. He's had the laugh of us, all right.
He could laugh his head off if I knew it really was all a hoax.
Well, I'm convinced it is. No police inquiry, no one girl that all this happened to, no scandal.
And no suicide.
We can settle that at once.
How?
By ringing up the infirmary. Either there's a dead girl there, or there isn't.
It'll look a bit queer, won't it, ringing up at this time of night?
I don't mind doing it.
And if there isn't?
Anyway, we'll see. Brumley, 8986. Is that the infirmary? This is Mr. Gerald Croft of Crofts Limited. Yes, we're rather worried about one of our employees. Have you had a girl brought in this afternoon who committed suicide by drinking disinfectant? Or any like suicide? Yes, I'll wait.
As he waits, the others show their nervous tension. Burling wipes his brow. Sheila shivers. Eric clasps and unclasps his hands.
Yes? You're certain of that? I see. Well, thank you very much. Good night. No girl has died in there today. Nobody's been brought in after drinking disinfectant. They haven't had a suicide for months.
There you are. Proof positive. The whole story is just a lot of moonshine. Nothing but an elaborate sell. Nobody likes to be sold as badly as that, but for all that, Gerald, have a drink.
Thanks. I think I could do with one now.
So could I.
And I must say, Gerald, you've argued this very cleverly, and I'm most grateful.
Well, you see, while I was out of the house, I'd time to cool off and think things out a little.
Yeah, he didn't keep you on the run as he did the rest of us. I'll admit now he gave me a bit of a scare at the time, but I had a special reason for not wanting any public scandal just now. Well, here's to us. Come on, Sheila, don't look like that. All over now.
The worst part is, but you're forgetting one thing I still can't forget. Everything we said had happened, really had happened. If it didn't end tragically, then that's lucky for us. But it might have done.
But the whole thing's different now. Come, you can see that, can't you? You all helped to kill her. And I wish you could have seen the look on your faces when he said that. Are you going to bed, young woman?
I want to get out of this. It frightens me the way you talk.
Nonsense. You'll have a good laugh over it yet. Look, you better ask Gerald for that ring you gave back to him, hadn't you? Then you'll feel better.
You're pretending everything's just as it was before.
I'm not.
No, but these others are.
Well, isn't it? We've been had, that's all.
So nothing really happened. So there's nothing to be sorry for, nothing to learn. We can all go on behaving just as we did.
Well, why shouldn't we?
I can tell you, whoever that inspector was, it was anything but a joke. You knew it then. You began to learn something, and now you've stopped. You're ready to go on in the same old way.
And you're not, eh?
No, because I remember what he said, how he looked, and how he made me feel. Fire and blood and anguish, and it frightens me the way you talk, and I can't listen to it anymore of it.
And I agree with Sheila. It frightens me too.
Well, go to bed then, and don't stand there being hysterical.
Oh, they're overtired. In the morning, they'll be as amused as we are.
Everything's all right now, Sheila. What about this ring?
No, not yet. It's too soon. I must think.
Oh, look at the pair of them. The famous younger generation who know it all. And they can't even take a joke.
The telephone rings sharply. There is a moment's complete silence. Burling goes to answer it.
Yes? Mr. Burling speaking. What? What?
But obviously the other person has rung off. He puts the telephone down slowly and looks in a panic-stricken fashion at the others.
That was the police. A girl has just died on her way to the infirmary after swallowing some disinfectant. And a police inspector is on his way here to ask some questions.
As they stare guiltily and dumbfounded, the curtain falls. End of play.
Well done, everyone.